Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana.
This land is our land now.
As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
We ain't giving up no river that belong to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to one of Globespan's program. I'm Nohar Singh, the host for Globespan 24/7, a platform that has been created 6 years ago, offering a community service. The platform invites all political parties, civil and religious leaders to share their opinions and address concerns. You can contact Globespan 24/7 by calling 631-782-8694 or email us at support@globespan24x7.com. So once again, welcome tonight. Our topic this evening is how can the United States of America affect additional positive changes for Guyana's social, economic, and security development. Our guest tonight, Mr. Mike Singh, International Affairs, Trade, ICT, and multi-international security expert. We also have Professor Dr. Terence Blackman, Associate Professor of Mathematics at Medgar Evers College. And we have Dr. Vishnu Bisram, a political scientist, someone that has been on the scene in Guyana and outside of Guyana for many, many years. We're all familiar with these three gentlemen. They have been contributors towards Globespan in the past, and we continue to engage them in conversations that could help us better be informed and also be able to get a clear understanding of opinions from different sides. In keeping with our topic tonight, I just want to wind the clock back a few years, or more than a few years. I want to go back to what most, especially Indo-Guyanese, felt was a very bad time in their history. And it's a time when there were disclosure that the CIA were involved in removing Dr. Chedi Jagan from power. Now that's something that has rested on many Guyanese heart, particularly the Indo-Guyanese. But I want to be able to kind of see if there's another side to this. Yes, after the removal, we have seen a dictatorship for 28 years, a hardship on individuals, on families, on society, on religion, in every part of our country. And that dictatorship affects all Guyanese, be it Indo, Afro, or any other races. It lasted for 28 years. But I want to go to Mike Singh to start out tonight. And I want to ask Mike Singh, have there ever been an other examination if that did not take place and we did end up having what Dr. Jagan was leading towards, a communist government? Would we have ended up with a failed state as we have seen in Cuba, Eastern Europe? Would we still be in the hands of Russia or vis-a-vis, be it China today? Would Guyana or Guyanese been granted so many visas to leave Guyana and establish this very dynamic, robust, and a very healthy diaspora, not only in the United States of America, but also in Canada and to a certain extent to the UK. The diaspora grew so large that and became so successful that they turned around to assist Guyana with significant contribution to the economy, not only in repatriation, but in other areas. So in the sense, America always talk about actions for the greater cause, for the greater good. Are these actions compared to the hardship of dictatorship, or could it have been hardship with a failed communist state? Mike, you want to take it?
Oh, yes, thank you. One of my favorite topics. Let me go back to the 1960s, the height of the Cold War in the Western Hemisphere, when the United States made it pellucidly clear this is their backyard, and they were going to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. Dr. Jagan, in his meeting with United States then President John F. Kennedy, and in the presence of the then Secretary of State Dean Rusk, and Schlesinger, who was Secretary of, I think he was a press secretary or aide to JFK.
Aide to JFK.
Aide to JFK. They made it clear, Dr. Jagan, we have no problem about you being a nationalist and seeking independence for your country. However, we cannot allow another Cuba in this hemisphere. And Dr. Jagan made it clear that he was not prepared to abandon his Bolshevik ideals, which I consider misguided, because had he said, look, I'm willing to soften my stand, I'm willing to operate within the construct of what the Americans were then pushing to, they were calling it the Great Society, which was a pillar of John F. Kennedy's engagement with the countries south of the Rio Grande. But Dr. Jagan was so stubborn, it led to the Americans embracing the lesser of two evils, and hence the removal of Jagan and the promotion of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. One was the architect and one was the contractor. And let me go further to add, the PNC didn't do all those things they did without the complicit support which the PPP gave under the guise of critical support, such as nationalization of foreign-owned assets, commanding heights of the economy. All of these things were actively supported by the PPP in the Parliament of Guyana. So the PNC didn't act carte blanche, but the PPP was there with them, lock, stock, and barrel, in bringing about some of the very hardships that affected all Guyanese of all tribe, of all stripes. But if Jagan had not been so hard-headed, he might have still been in power, and arrogance and hard of hearing, what people say in Guyana, if you're hard of hearing, you're going to pay a price. Well, it's a sad thing. He paid the ultimate price. Thank you.
I guess, Dr. Blackman, what I was trying to ask that if it is that I understand the history, what took place, but I guess what I'm trying to, the question is more leaning towards, had it been a communist state, and if the CIA did not overthrow Dr. Jagan or removed him from government, would we have seen a level of suffering, given the history of the communist state, be it Cuba, Eastern Europe, of being, ended up it being a failed state? And would we as Guyanese, having such a robust diaspora in America?
So let me say good night to everyone. Thank you, Mr. Noor Singh, Devin Bassoon, Mike, Dr. Bisram. That's an interesting question. It's a counterfactual. I mean, I would start off by saying, it's really impossible to know how Guyana's history, would have unfolded had Cheddi Jagan remained in office. But I think you could sketch out some plausible alternative trajectories by thinking about what Jagan's stated policy was in the regional context of the 1960s and 70s. And then look at the path that we actually took under Forbes Burnham. And I think in this respect, Mike is not terribly wrong Jagan had long sort of espoused a kind of democratic socialist agenda, land reform, state-owned enterprises, redistribution of wealth. And so absent its removal, counterintuitively, Guyana might have pursued more aggressive nationalization of the sugar estates, of the bauxite mines, and so on, mirroring, as Mike rightly noted, Cuba and Tanzania and the sort of experiments of the 60s and the 70s. Certainly, we would have pursued, which we did, but perhaps even more strongly, the non-aligned economic partnerships. So certainly friendly ties with the Soviet bloc, certainly China for technical assistance. We would have benefited. Certainly, we would have benefited from these infrastructure grants that, in some weird way, we're benefiting from them today. The one thing I think that would have perhaps, and this is where I think we might have missed an opportunity, in a sense that from the outset, Jagan really sought to build these sort of transcendent class-based alliances that cut across Indo-Afro-Guyanese lines, and but with mixed success. So it wasn't perfect, but at least that was a guiding philosophy. And I think remaining in power, he could have perhaps institutionalized some of the cross-ethnic, class-based things that I think perhaps even today Guyana needs, that would buffer this sort of ethnic polarization that is part of our society. So certainly, I don't think we changed significantly our foreign policy and geopolitics. I don't think we would have changed significantly. Certainly, again, this very similar policies to Forbes Burnham: healthcare and education, land reform, rural prosperity. So that certainly would have advanced much further than it has advanced now. And I think sort of prudent natural resource management. He was not a capitalist. It's only in the last PPP Congress that we have moved from being, that the PPP formally became a no longer a party that was communist in that sense. So I think the trajectory, as strange as it might sound, just looking at the policies, might not have been terribly different. I think the opportunity for a broader sort of class-based formations that tended to sort of mitigate some of the racial aspects, I think those I think are the possible things that could have been radically different. And certainly, I don't know, the good that has come of this is the fact that we now have this large diaspora that sits all across the world. That in some subsequent question, I will argue that perhaps this is the way in which we can help our country at home.
Thank you, Dr. Blackman. Dr. Bisram, surely if you would like to comment on that question I posed. However, I also want to go a step further and fast forward to 1990. We had one of the most powerful men in the world when he sat as president, President Jimmy Carter, that is, who took it in his interest and walked the streets in Guyana, stayed at the Pegasus Hotel, and got so involved into the 1990 election, and thereby bringing about what we call the change of government, moving into the democratic elected mode. Dr. Bisram, you're welcome to comment on the CIA aspect, but rather also to spend a little more time on talking about President Carter and the goodness of the contribution, because he did represent the United States of America, and this is one of those external effects that really changed the trajectory of where we are today in Guyana. So go ahead, Dr. Bisram.
Okay, so let me speak. The latter question speaks directly to the topic that we're supposed to talk about tonight. Now, both gentlemen give, I thought, were very satisfactory, adequate responses to the question you posed initially, that the United States intervened in Guyana because of national interest, self-interest. All nations look after their own self-interest, and certainly the large nations like the United States, the then Soviet Union, subsequently China, and today China, of course, India in recent decades, and so forth. Yes, I agree with Professor Terence Blackman that under Chetty, he would have pursued the same policy and perhaps even more radical than Forbes Burnham, and we would have ended up in the same kind of issues and problems. Now, this diaspora, this huge globalized diaspora, emerged, I think, primarily as a result of the kind of policy that Forbes Burnham pursued. But would it have been different under Chetty? Probably not. You know, the economy would have stagnated and people would have had to migrate as well. So Jimmy Carter came to Guyana primarily because of election rigging. So we had election rigging in 1968, 73. We had the rigged referendum in 78. We have the rigged election in 1980, 85. And elections were announced for 1990, which certainly would have been rigged again because there were no changes in how the elections were going to be conducted. So many of us here in the United States engaged in what we would call a kind of a struggle in which we lobbied Congress, the presidency of the United States, and other countries as well. Diaspora groups in other countries did the same. Whether it was the work of those of us who lobbied Congress and the United States government, or whether it was a result of the collapse of communism in 1990, we certainly had an opportunity for free and fair elections. Now, I think as a result of our lobbying, we had statements issued by members of Congress, and we also had a very powerful statement from then Senator Ted Kennedy, whose brother was instrumental in toppling John F. Kennedy, in toppling Chetty Jagan in 1964. So George Bush Sr. issued this statement that Guyana must hold free and fair elections, sent a warning note to then Desmond Hoyt, said that Guyana will suffer serious consequences if the elections are not free and fair, and the United States pledged certain assistance that would help in free and fair elections. The Carter Center was approached by the Bush administration. We approached the Carter Center as well here as lobbying groups. The PPP and the PCD in Guyana also approached the Carter Center to consider an observer mission in Guyana. Carter did make a trip, had discussions with Desmond Hoyt. Hoyt agreed that there is going to be certain reforms, and the elections were put off until 1992. The date was announced. There were rallies, and I think just about a week before the election was supposed to be held, it was canceled, abruptly canceled, and then delayed until 1992 when the electoral reforms were institutionalized. And Jimmy Carter, I think, made two more trips, including the one on to observe the elections. And so we had the United States positive impact on elections in Guyana. And so you were posing the question, what additional positive effects did or can the United States impact on Guyana's elections?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bisram. And moving to Mike, Mike saying we had another significant effect that really sort of changed the way Guyana moved, and that is in 2020 election. President Donald Trump, under President Donald J. Trump, and his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, they moved in terms of making it very clear that they wanted a transparent and much more the transformation of government to the fair and free election. So do you want to comment on that a little, Mike, and in terms of the positive impact America had on Guyana?
Yeah, America had a positive impact, but it appears that the chairwoman of the Guyana Elections Commission did not seem to have heeded the lessons. And I'm fearful that come September 1st, we are going to have a calamitous repeat of the disastrous problems we had in 2020, when it took like 6 months. The international electoral observer missions that were in Guyana in 2020, including the EU, and I sat down when the EU were in Georgetown. Across from me was Alan Nandalal, Mustafa, and I think if I recall well, the Minister Vikram Bharat representing the PPP. You had civil society, you had the PNC, and the EU specifically made 26 recommendations. Now, I understand for recent press conferences by AFC leader Hughes and his wife Kathy Hughes that their January meeting with GCOM did not go well. Nigel Hughes categorized it as a disaster because the chairwoman made it clear that she was not interested in 26 recommendations. You're lucky if you get 2 of the recommendations implemented. And further to that, she did not see the need for any operational review of what took place in 2020. So I will say, brace yourself for another roller coaster ride because some of the things the EU recommended was the adoption of biometrics. And I don't see that happening. I can tell you the elections are going to be a Pandora's box, and good luck to people there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And to go a step further, Dr. Blackman, given that President Trump is in office and the situation that we're facing in Venezuela, do you feel under the Trump administration that there is a much more greater level of protection that will be coming in from the United States vis-a-vis the threat from Venezuela?
Yeah, I certainly think that the Trump administration will act very forceful. Well, that is my view, but I would perhaps temper that view and say if we, as part of the diaspora, do the kinds of things that Dr. Besseram just described, that we lobby our representatives here on behalf of Guyana. And that's one of the points I wanted to make as part of this program, that, what America can do for us is also a function of what we, the Guyanese diaspora, can do within the context of the halls of American power, within the Congress, within our state legislature, within the Senate, etc. And so I think that there is certainly a disposition on the part of the Trump administration to act decisively against Venezuela for its violation of many norms. And so that redounds to the benefit of Guyana, and we can and ought to expect support from the Trump administration relative to our case with Venezuela. So I certainly think that we're on the right side, if you will. Just thinking in terms of our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is someone who has clearly has visited Guyana. So there's no question about the American engagement in a very serious way with Guyana. I don't know. I don't know, whether or not he's visited, say, Suriname or
Went to Suriname.
He went to Suriname also.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think we're on the right side in this regard. One point I wanted to raise, and I raised this in the context of the conversation, which I think is important. The earlier question, when I think one of the things there's certainly this issue of rigging. I mean, I bet, during the course of the as we led up to the elections, I bet many people that this thing will never be resolved in a quick and easy manner. And I think that we should also be mindful that given the ethnic polarization that we talked about, that every single election in Guyana is going to be contested, and it's going to be contested because when you lose the elections, as is sort of evident now, you're not just losing an election with the chance. I mean, think of what's happened. One party has been in power for almost 28, 30 years. The other party has been in power for another 28, now 28.
Yeah.
Right? With a short sort of 5-year span in between. So essentially, for people in the different racial tribes, I'll use this, when you lose, you're losing for a generation. And so at that moment, there will be a fight. And I think that the way we begin to do that, I think we have to begin to acknowledge, we have to begin to begin to stop demonizing each other, you know. And I say this not as a member of any political party, but I say this as someone who was born in 1968 and grew up in this dictatorship that everyone references, right? The point is, I mean, my father and others, they saw themselves as being architects of a new sovereign Guyana, right? They didn't see themselves as you know, people oppressing their fellow countrymen. You know, they extended water to the hinterland regions. They built schools. They made free education. They talked about feeding and clothing and housing yourself. Today, I saw a few days ago, everyone said Guyana is the only country in the world that is self-sufficient. Well, this was an idea that was there all the time. So I think one thing I'd like to say is that when we think of something like Carter, you know, I think what we have to begin to do is we have to acknowledge the sort of you know, the platforms of the human achievements of the various groups, but understand that in order for us, and I think if we have this framing, in order for us to complete the promise of independence of 1966, in order to build a Guyana where, you know, the democracy institutions are not negotiable, then I think we have to find ways to acknowledge the contributions of all of the people who have helped to build Guyana. So I say that not in a partisan political way, but simply say that as a way for us to think about how you know, how this gets informed. I mean, I don't mean to apologize for myself or for anyone. I mean, I'm simply saying, as a 56-year-old man who was born in 1968 to, you know, parents who were part of the lower middle class of Guyana, you know, I didn't live in a world where my father went to work every day and oppressed people, right? So I think we have to learn how to balance this aspect of our shared history.
Yeah. So Dr. Bisram, we've come from 1990, the US, be it visa President Carter or Carter Center. How do you see that this current administration, be it the Trump administration, how deep of a role will they be playing in the next election on September 1st?
Forget that in 2020, there was also an attempt to rig the election. And it was Donald Trump who was the president, although he himself may not have played a significant role, but Mike Pompeo was, and others who are the State Department. Certainly, I believe that if they had not intervened, then we probably would have had quote unquote a rigged result. And as Professor Blackman said, you know, that's how elections are in Guyana. They're contested not just politically but ethnically as well. And regardless of the outcome, one would always claim that there was fraud and rigging. I don't know how significant the Donald Trump administration will be in this coming election, but certainly the ambassador in Guyana has repeatedly spoken, that elections should and must be free and fair, and the United States is prepared to offer various kinds of electoral assistance to ensure that there is free and fair elections. The United States is working closely with the Carter Center, as well as with the European Commission. And recently there was talk about working in collaboration with the Commonwealth Group out of London. So yes, the United States will provide some kind of financial support, technical support, if necessary and required. And the United States and Guyana always welcomes any kind of support, whether it be technical or not. I was told in Guyana when I was there last week that 2 individuals will come from the Commonwealth team very soon to Guyana to help with the technical aspects of the election. There will be a Commonwealth observer team that will join the Jimmy Carter Center. Today's newspaper indicated that the Jimmy Carter Center will be in Guyana, and it is being funded by the United States Congress. So in that sense, the Trump administration is involved in the election through the Secretary of State and the Department or the Agency of of the Secretary of State.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bisram. So, Mike, I want to go to the next topic, being Exxon. Just if we could just spend like 2 minutes each on this topic here. I mean, there's obviously a lot of news about the flawed contracts. Everyone have their views on this. It's calling for renegotiations and all. But Mike, there's another side to this as well. Prior to Exxon bringing oil above ground in Guyana, where were we compared to where we are today? I mean, we're billions of dollars more, and I'm not condoning in any way the contracts. I think a lot of failures came from the people that represented us in those negotiations. But there's some bright side to this, Mike. What I'm trying to do is to bring out the other side of it, given the fact that in the narrative that we are seeing most of the time is all the negative side of these type of relationship. So go ahead, Mike, maybe just a couple of minutes on this.
Well, Exxon is in the business of making money. It has a board. It has reporting requirements, statutory requirements to the SEC.
Shareholders.
It has its shareholders. Exxon, ultra deep exploration calls for very deep pockets. And if Exxon negotiated a deal, and he got a sweetheart deal because the people who represented Guyana were confounded idiots. Don't blame Exxon. Blame the people who represented Guyana. Exxon realized that it was dealing with a legion of people suffering from irrational exuberance. And, it put forward. Guyana did not get professionals in the negotiating of any deal with Exxon. Everybody in Guyana is an expert. They will read something and they will come and say, people tell me, they're contractors, they're this, they're that, as one man told me, Guyana is a place where you have a problem for every solution. And the fact is, whoever negotiated for Guyana did not do their homework. They were weak. Guyana should have gone out and hired some top-notch talent, brought them in, paid them top dollars, and let them negotiate. But Guyana, as usual, likes to save money. This begging bowl doctrine. Don't want to spend a penny even on their own assistance. And Professor was talking about defense. Well, waiting on the US to arrive might be late. You need to create your own strategic deterrence to repel any kind of foreign threat or invasion. But the final analysis, don't blame Exxon. Blame the so-called experts that negotiated for Guyana. We have a specific man in Guyana. He's like a nine-handed Hindu deity, This person knows everything. I refer to this individual as the eternal leader. But don't blame Exxon. Blame the persons who were given the sacred duty of negotiating a good deal for Guyana.
No. Dr. Blackman, 2 minutes on the same topic.
Yeah, look, I mean, I became seriously involved in Guyana in large part because some years ago, around the question of oil and gas. And some years ago, and it was before all of this sort of came out, I went to the University of Michigan and I saw there was a mathematician from Exxon named Cassandra McZeal, and she gave a talk, and I was blown away by the sophistication of the talk. And I said, well, if these Exxon people, and then I realized for the first time what ExxonMobil really was. I mean, it's this huge multinational that literally had its own university. It had its own set of experts doing every last calculation that you could do. So Mike is right. We were completely overmatched in this. This is part of, I've seen these photos quite frequently on the internet where, like Guyanese representatives go to by themselves to a meeting. And on one side of the table, there's one person for Guyana. And the other side of the table, there are 30 people on the other side representing the interests of the other side. And I think, there's a certain kind of there's a lack of humility on the part of many of our folks to not fully appreciate, the asymmetry in knowledge and understanding about and expertise in various areas. Having said that, I want to sort of echo what you've said. I think, our budget is $6 billion US. It's not a small number. It is a significant number. And I think that, we need to avoid also this sense of like the whole world is falling. And I know that, some people, I get very, people criticize me a lot for saying that. But yes, the royalty rates and the profit oil splits are perhaps not what they should be. Yes, we don't get as much of the local content and the capacity building jobs as we should. Yes, there's probably not enough accountability. And, we've seen the thing where the auditors discovered like, $200 million worth of something that has been charged to Guyana that they have no idea. Yes, there are probably, we're suffering from maybe resource curse issues and other kinds of things. But at the same time, I think it is true. We're building a bridge across the Demerara River. We're putting 4-lane highways down. We're doing things, you can see from the airport, the traffic that's going into Guyana. So at the same time, we can make this. I want to sort of argue for a slightly, look, the deal was not the best deal, but it certainly moves us forward if we think about where we are. And so we should, as we think about contract negotiation, we shouldn't be, putting people in a box and saying, we want to repudiate our foreign partners because we didn't get a good deal. No, we got to determine effort, focus effort, how to recalibrate, how to balance our rights, sovereign rights as Guyanese, the benefit that our community is getting with the long-term instability of the investment, right? Those people have spent $40 billion, right? And think about what they're doing. I think we don't think about what they're doing. They're 150 miles out in the Atlantic Ocean. They've gone drilled down to the they've gone down to the Atlantic floor, maybe another 2 miles down to the floor, and then gone for 2 more miles into the seabed to pull this thing up. Yeah, so it's not I would like us to have a more balanced attitude about it. That's my honest opinion, right? And it's not informed by it. It's just an honest opinion that we focus on how we utilize effectively the money that we have, and then think about how we recalibrate so that we bring the deal into better balance. And I'm sure that with that sort of policy, people would be happy to think about working with us in that way.
Yeah. Dr. Bisram, I want to go to a video, and I want you to address the video after Devin plays the video, and really associate this announcement by Secretary of State Rubio in the context of Guyana. How can this help us in Guyana? Because we are in situations where as soon as the critical support is not even accepted in Guyana. It's either you're on one side or the other side. You can't seem to find a middle ground. And it's so difficult to even offer any opinions of where someone could learn from it. How can this, in the context of Guyana, Secretary Rubio announcement, how can this help us in shaping our country to a better position? Devin, you want to go ahead?
Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced new visa restrictions the Trump administration is implementing against foreign authorities who it says are complicit in censoring Americans. For too long, Americans have been fined, harassed, and even charged by foreign authorities for exercising their free speech rights, Rubio wrote on X. Today I am announcing a new visa restriction policy that will apply to foreign officials and persons who are complicit in censoring Americans. Free speech is essential to the American way of life, a birthright over which foreign governments have no authority.
Dr. Bisram, in the context of Guyana, how can this help us?
Look, I happened to have written an article yesterday. I thought it would have been published today on this very, very same speech that Marco Rubio uttered, I think it was last week or about 10 days ago. I'm in agreement with it. I think he has not gone far enough. I think this should have happened decades ago. I think the United States has influence that it can use in
No.
order to shape political behavior in foreign countries, especially those that are authoritarian, but in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean. Marco Rubio is right. Americans who travel abroad, if they exercise their free speech rights as they do in the United States, they could be prosecuted. They could be arrested, harassed, intimidated, deported. And so it is a very, very important move by the United States Secretary of State. I would have liked to see him go further to sanction politicians, officials who accept bribes in attracting foreign investment. We know that there are several companies that come to Guyana, for example, and offer huge amounts of bribes to politicians under all administrations, not any particular administration, under all administrations. And I believe the Secretary of State should also make that a condition for sanction as well, that if you are caught or receiving, accepting, or encouraging or demanding bribes, you should be prosecuted. I think also the speech made reference to anyone who travels from another country and come to the United States in order to serve indictments or summons to Americans for exercising free speech. They will also have their visa restricted. I am totally in support of it. And I hope the Secretary of State, Americans, will go further to sanction officials in other nations as well that seek to take advantage of American soft spot for democracy.
Yeah. Before you jump in, Mike, I just want to state some of Globespan goals. Goals to build a society that is much more informed from all sides, a society where one can change from within so as to affect the changes on the outside, a society that can reason together, and a society that can work to help keep hope alive. Our vision is a country where its moral and ethical compass are directed by the word of God. Imagine a Guyana where all Afro, Indo, Amerindians, and all other races value each other as equal human beings. Imagine a Guyana where her wealth becomes your wealth. I wanted to state the goals of Globespan as we continue to offer these programs on a weekly basis, on Mondays with Dr. Rose, and on Wednesdays. I am now currently hosting the program, but with guests and Dr. Bisram being a part of it many, many times with us. I want to, Mike, I'm sure you want to comment on that Secretary of State directive.
I support it totally, and I will go a stage further. Those foreign individuals who dare to trespass on American soil in violation of our sovereignty and attempt to serve summons and arrive armed, or, such as the policeman who came to the United States. I have no brief for Rickford Burke, but to go there and try to serve someone in a US jurisdiction without notifying the FBI, the Department of Justice, those individuals must not only lose their US visa, they should be arrested and shipped to CCOT in El Salvador. There are lots of lovely holding facilities at the Hotel CCOT, and any Guyanese official, including the Attorney General and others, if you think you're going to terrorize us, go right ahead. The Americans will love to move you to CCOT. Bukele will welcome you and give you a 5-course meal. In fact, I'm in favor of seeing a prison like the one in CCOT gets built maybe in Guyana to help us with all of the crime we have. They need something like that. But, the Chinese themselves were operating an illegal police station, somewhere out in Flushing. I don't know if you recall, Nohar, just last year during the Biden administration. And when the American law enforcement became aware of this, they were incensed. So you cannot sit 1,000 miles away and terrorize us. I even support seizure and forfeiture of your assets. If you have bank accounts in the United States, if you have properties, if you have businesses, and you're engaging in terrorizing through cybercrime laws, through threats, any kind of thing, violence, intimidation, harassment, all options are on the table to go after you. And I support expelling persons who have US green cards if they engage in this for and on behalf of any foreign governments. Not only their expulsion, but even stripping them of their United States citizenship and maybe sending them to Guantanamo for 40 years. We have to be very clear and we have to be very deliberate. And I'm very happy. I'm very pleased. I've worked in Marco Rubio's campaign here in Miami. I know him personally. And when he said this, it really, if because most Guyanese living in the diaspora are mortally afraid of speaking out, that when they go back home, they might plant something in their suitcase, they will harass them. But we need to reinforce that this is not just cancellation of visas. I think that's too light. I want to see forfeiture of assets, stripping of green card status, and revoking of US citizenship. Might be drastic, but at least it will drive home the point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank you,
no
Mike.
harm. The secretary said not only will the officials be sanctioned,
The family too.
the family members as well.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bisram.
Yeah, yeah. So, Dr. Blackman, I want to touch on one of your topics that you have taken it into your heart. We have seen that OFAC, and we'll bring up that video just now, has sanctioned several police officers in Guyana. But I want to kind of bring that back and rewind that about a month ago with Adriana's issue. We've seen the failure of the police department in terms of how they handle that matter. There have been calls by the Adriana's family for the FBI to investigate. Now we have seen that OFAC itself has been addressing some of the criminal activities within the police department. My question to you is that how is it that we can be able to kind of encourage and call for more of this type of situations being addressed by OFAC and other departments of the United States of America that could be able to help the social position of Guyanese, be it that many of them have lost confidence in the law enforcement department and in other areas in government. You're muted, Dr. Blackman.
So let me first start by saying I think we have been on this topic for some time. We've been on this topic since the first sanction of Mr. Mohammed, May, the young woman who worked with them or was a permanent secretary. We've been on this topic since that moment, and we've been saying in an unequivocal manner that Guyana needs to recognize that the law enforcement, the Guyana police force, is deeply problematic. We've seen the
Dr. Blackman, can I just interrupt for 1 second? I forgot to call for the video. Can Devin bring up the video?
So I will listen to the video.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
perhaps that will also inform.
Yeah.
For decades, Guyana has been a transshipment point for the movement of drugs from South America to the United States and Europe. Drug traffickers exploit the rivers and jungles of South America by transiting large quantities of cocaine from Colombia and Venezuela through the waters of Guyana and Suriname. Guyana's proximity to the Caribbean, as well as reported corruption along its ports and borders, allow maritime vessels, also known as narco-submarines, to transit through its waters undetected. Traffickers utilize these vessels to smuggle cocaine from the ports of Guyana and Suriname across the Atlantic to the United States, Europe, and the Caribbean. Traffickers also coordinate the importation of cocaine loads from Colombia and Venezuela to Guyana via small aircraft, utilizing illegal airstrips in Guyana as landing spots. Cocaine has been discovered buried in underground bunkers located on airstrips and in jungle territory, with Guyana's Barima-Waini region as a prominent location. Cocaine is then flown via aircraft to the United States, Europe, and the Caribbean.
Yeah, I think I read this story when it emerged, and it was in this story, one of the sanctioned individuals is a senior member of the police force. And, it is clear that if this kind of activity, narco submarines, airstrips for places to land, that kind of activity cannot occur without a network of highly placed and powerful stakeholders. There's no way that a single police officer can carry out that activity within the context of Guyana. And so this is a moment, and I had hoped that the failure of the police in the context of the Adriana Young would call for some reckoning, some serious reckoning. We again, this is not new. We had here conversations about one of the police officers who had an amount of money in his bank account, which, when I computed, I sort of said, if you worked every single day at a certain
90
rate
years.
for 90 years, this would be kind of where you could get to, right? So we know that this has gone bad. And I think the thing for us is to encourage our colleagues. And I don't know how many more of these, we will require in order for someone who's part of the leadership group of Guyana, who is not tainted in this context, to understand that as a country, it's a one-way street. It's clear that it's a one-way street. We've seen how places like Colombia, in as much as they're finding themselves back. We just saw a few days ago the presidential candidate in Colombia being shot. So attempted assassination. These things, in the moment we encourage this kind of culture to take root, it's like a vine. It will squeeze out every good thing in our society. And I really hope that that our leadership across racial, across ethnic, across civil society, that begins to recognize that you can't build a society on, you can't build a modern society where drug dealers and have a place of honor at the table. You simply can't do that. What does a young man or woman aspire to? And we have the opportunity to put this behind us. It's unfortunate.
Dr. Bisram, is this a tip of the iceberg, Dr. Bisram? How do you feel? I mean, are we going to see much more names coming out soon?
I'm sure the United States has a long list of people who are involved in this kind of narco-trafficking, the narco operations, whether it's from Colombia to Venezuela, into Guyana, from Suriname, and so on and so forth. I do know of names. Unfortunately, I can't reveal some of them. But the United States takes its time, and at the opportune moment, they release these kind of lists. Don't be surprised if there are so many others who are very influential in all aspects of society in Guyana, who are involved not only in drug smuggling, but in gold smuggling, diamond smuggling, and other kinds of illegal operations across the border. Yes, it's the tip of the iceberg. And again, it's another positive aspect of the United States involvement in Guyana. I hope it will become more deeply involved. I hope they can set up some kind of anti-narcotics institute squad operation in Guyana. I know requests were made going back into the into the 1990s, 2000, and subsequent years. I don't know if the Guyana government has embraced the request by the United States DEA to establish a unit in Guyana. I hope they do, and I hope it's a matter that is brought up and discussed in the election campaign.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to stay with you for a couple more minutes, Dr. Bisram. And truly, you've been a foot soldier for Guyana, not only locally in Guyana, but we have seen you all over. You travel the world, and Guyana has always been at the forefront. Of late, you have launched an initiative, and that initiative is called Making Guyana Part of America. You launched a website, GuyanaAmericaAlliance.org. Now, Dr. Bisram, you've been around a long time. I just mentioned
Yeah,
that
I lost you, Noha.
you've been around a long time. You've been a good foot soldier for Guyana. Of late, you've been very assertive. You've been very clear in terms of your opinions of the way you are seeing things in Guyana unfolded. Sort of indicate that you've come to a point, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but more or less, where you feel that definitely changes is necessary. We want to go to a video that kind of we extrapolate this from the website that you launched a couple of days ago. Devin, could you play that video? And after that video, Dr. Bisram, maybe you could just comment if are there more folks involved with you? Some of your thoughts and your plans for this initiative.
Guyana
Devin?
government is broken. The state is under threat from drug traffickers and criminals. Nothing is done efficiently. Most politicians are corrupt, hustling for themselves. Corruption is everywhere. There is a hustle for contract or to engage in fraud to get rich quickly without hard work. Politicians own many companies getting state contracts. There is very little honesty in government. Good governance is not in the vocabulary of politicians. Yet people are beholden to politicians because of racial and party loyalty, and not what is in their or the country's best interests.
Oh, Dr. Bisram, that's quite an initiative that you're launching.
That's a tough indictment, huh? Look, a group of us in Guyana and here in the diaspora, not only in the United States, but in other countries as well, held discussions. And surprisingly, those people in the diaspora, whether it's in the UK, Canada, here, we all feel that the United States could play a more significant role in Guyana affairs. And we feel there should be a cementing of ties. The ultimate goal would be to Guyana to become a kind of a territory of the United States. My preference is something like not Western, but American Samoa in the Pacific. Those of us who are familiar with Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and so forth, would know what I'm referring to, what I'm talking about. But basically, I would have liked to see a Guyana that is autonomous, runs its own affairs, but that falls within the jurisdiction of the United States. The primary reason I have for that is protection from Venezuela, protection from the kind of drug trafficking that takes place across our borders, the kind of corruption that exists in Guyana. We have a broken state. Many describe it as a failed state. So no, it's not just an initiative of me, but it's an initiative of many people. I travel around Guyana and I discuss this idea across the coast of Guyana, from Crabwood Creek all the way to Charity, and people seem very, very supportive of it. Is it achievable and doable? Very, very difficult. Some calls it the 51st state. I am not thinking of the 51st state. I'm just thinking in terms of being some kind of a territory. If that's not possible, if that's not practical, certainly some kind of close alliance between us in Guyana and the American state. I think this would be helpful to Guyana in the long run. Let's be honest and practical. Guyana has found oil, and we are extracting huge amounts of oil. We are not pleased with the amount of money that we are deriving from the extraction, sale, royalty, profit sharing of the oil. But people are migrating. We are not stopping this flow up north. More and more people are migrating. Every time I go up Berbice or Essequibo or on the West Coast, East Coast, East Bank, West Bank, homes are closing up. People are packing up. From the last election to now, at least 25,000 Guyanese migrated to States and Canada, and probably thousands more are crossing the border because the standard of living in Guyana, as much as you would say that our GDP per capita might be 24, 40, 50,000, it's not filtering down. The money is being kept by a small group of people. The cost of living in Guyana is extremely, extremely high, perhaps the highest in the world. So life is not improving by much in Guyana, even though income is shooting up. And this is one of the reasons I think that Guyana should consider to be some kind of appendage to the United States. And that appendage is to be defined.
Yeah. Yeah. And Mr. Neville Setal wrote, Washington has the final say.
Of course.
Of course. Mike saying, what does the people benefit from such an initiative? And well, and maybe you just want to give us your opinion of such an initiative as well, but also focus on the benefits for the people of Guyana.
Well, one of the great things we could do if we're serious about improving ties with the US is invite Homeland Security to deploy permanently Customs Border Patrol agents to our airports, like you do in Canada, Bahamas, Bermuda, where you have pre-clearance. Station them at the airport in Guyana so they can examine every person, every suitcase, your fish, your achar, your kalonji, your bunjal duck, your bunjal shrimp, the whole 9 yards. If you have US Customs and Border Patrol agents in Guyana, they're going to be able to stem at your ports of entry and exit at Timeri Airport, at Ogle Airport, at all the wharves of Guyana. They're going to have a well-oiled unit with, German Shepherd dogs, sniffer dogs, everything. And they'll be able to get to the whole thing about this whole drug trafficking thing. They can use drones, they can use maritime surveillance, but give them the invitation to come to Guyana and set up shop. Now, there are going to be two good things will result from this. Not only will they be able to effectively wage this war on narcotics, drugs, you name it, but they will offer Guyanese the opportunity of being pre-cleared right there in Guyana. So when they arrive in the United States, they don't have to go through US Customs and Immigration. It's happening in Dubai, it's happening in Abu Dhabi, because those countries are what we know as trusted partners of the United States. At the same time, you won't be able to bribe them. They will be able to keep a firm eye using technology and AI and facial recognition on who's coming, who's going. They'll be able to keep a firm tap on the suitcases, the cargo. If you're clean, you're admissible, you board the flight, you make it to the US. If you're not admissible, right there and then at Timeri or wherever you're refused entry, and you don't have to worry. You could always return home to Berbice, West Coast, with your bunjal duck, your fried fish, and everything to consume locally. But that will be the first act of showing that Guyana is serious in its fight against narcotics. Today, the country is just literally a few steps away from being Panama under Noriega. You got the Sinaloa cartel operating, you got the Colombians, the Mexicans. The place has become a cesspit of moral decadence, of moral turpitude. These investigations are being done outside of the US and inside of Guyana using a number of technologies that the Guyana government don't even know what hits them. But we need to demonstrate If the government of Guyana is serious in its fight against the funding of terror, the smuggling of gold, smuggling of drugs, it must say to the United States, here is an open invitation for the United States Department of Homeland Security to station full-time customs, border patrol agents in Guyana. You've seen it at Pearson Airport. If you go to Canada and you're leaving Canada, come back into the US, they clear you. You go right away to a desk, you're on US territory, and they clear you, and you just land in the US as if it's a domestic flight. Why don't we have this? I challenge His Excellency President Irfan Ali, and I challenge Vice President Jack Dio, and I challenge the Attorney General to implement this tomorrow. If they are serious about fighting the flow of narcotics and bad elements into the United States.
Yeah. So, Dr. Blackman, the program is how can the US affect additional positive changes towards Guyana? This initiative by Dr. Bisram and others, do you feel that in any way that could be a step towards affecting positive changes, or any other suggestions that you would like to contribute?
No, I look, I just this morning I was moderating some discussion about diaspora bonds. And so I think an active, well-organized, diaspora alliance, such as the type that Dr. Bisram is proposing, certainly has the potential to, expand the remittance channels and philanthropy. It certainly allows the opportunity for, Guyana to be able to harness crisis response, like Mike was just talking about, emergency relief, certainly market access, right? So thinking about where we sit relative to the U.S. market, policy partnerships. So there is real value, but I want to caution us of not so easily giving up our sovereignty. I was reflecting that for a moment. We started this program talking about Dr. Chetty Jagan and the fact that the government of John F. Kennedy removed Chetty Jagan in some substantive way. And part of this experiment that we've been going on called Guyana has been one in which we've been trying to assert our sovereignty over the course of those 56 years that we're a nation. So I don't want us to give that up so easily. I think we in some ways, Dr. Bisram is right. We're a small person in a room with a big weight, and we can't escape. In a sense, our original leaders made a strategic decision. You can't really be non-aligned if you're Guyana. And so you have to align yourself with someone big, and the big person in your neighborhood is the United States. The question is what the form of that arrangement needs to look like. And I certainly think that we should explore as many possibilities, but I would hate to see us give up our sovereignty as Guyanese, because I think that's something that is very important. But I certainly see the advantage of, the ability to transfer skills and knowledge, the ability to, do diplomacy right, the ability to brand ourselves as a nation or as an entity in an effective manner. So, question environment, thinking about the kind of support that we could have in our environment and climate resilience and these kinds of things that cost a tremendous amount of money. So certainly these ideas have sense, but I would caution that we don't want to give up the fact that Guyana is an independent country, and that has some value too.
Yeah. And on that note, Mr. Sheikh Abraham, he wrote or commented, "I welcome that initiative." He didn't say which initiative, but it's the only initiative that we are talking about right now. So, Dr. Bisram, you mentioned earlier in the program about, communicating with senators, the work that you guys did in the 80s. And I know there were many times you guys wrote letters and tried to have meetings with some of the senators like Jesse Helms, Ted Cochran, Lloyd Benson from Texas.
Texas, yeah.
Men who really stood for the right and wrong of society. And but those are days that where you could get a letter into a senator assistant committee and probably get a hearing. Today, mostly it's pay to play. You have money, you hire lobbyists. I think the Guyana government is paying something like $50,000 a month to lobbyists. You have to pay to play. Given the fact that we are trying to say that in tonight's program, how can America affect additional positive changes? How do we get to these senators? How do we get to these committees? Or how can we be able to move an agenda forward where we are saying, look, the shape of Guyana after 59 years is not where it should be. And with the income of oil and other resources, Guyanese could be doing better, but we need your help. In your experience, Dr. Bisram, what would be your guidance or comments in that area?
So Nohar, you keep using the term "you guys," and I suppose that you guys, I mean, people like me, Ravi Dev, Bitram Ramarak, Vasan Ramracha, a few others. But you were also part of the movement in the 80s and up until 1992, and even subsequently. So credit also go out to you. And of course, we were not the only ones. There was Chuck Mohan, Arjun Karshan, the ACG boys, and so on and so forth. There were also friends of mine who were from the WPA, including David Hines, who also played a very significant role in combating electoral fraud from the United States here in New York, and also when he was doing his graduate work at Howard University in Washington. In those days, you're right. There was a kind of a pay to play, but it was small amount of money. You did fundraisers, a small amount. It was breakfast, lunch, dinner, and you get people like Stephen Solars and others. Today it is big money. Big money talks, but money is not the only matter. The only factor that wins over members of Congress. You have to have a very well organized group and show these members of Congress that you actually vote. Numbers mean something. Rickford Burke has been very, very effective in getting representatives from Brooklyn to respond to him because he has numbers. That kind of operation and organization does not exist elsewhere in the Guyanese community except in Brooklyn. The Guyanese in Queens and Bronx and Staten Island are not very, very organized. They talk a lot, but other than that, they don't do anything. And they certainly don't attend fundraisers. I could tell you, I attended several fundraisers, and Guyanese from Queens find it very difficult to go pay $50, $100, $150, $200 to go to a fundraiser, or even to make a campaign contribution online to these politicians. If you don't build a relationship with the members of Congress, they're not going to bother you. And you know something? They also look at voting. I remember in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when I phoned Congressman Stephen Solars, and there was another one here from my area where Conti live. His son is now the senator. You know, they went and checked the record. Mr. Bisram, you know you didn't vote? They have a record of who voted, and they were right, because I never was a citizen, and therefore I could not vote. So they do check these things when you put out a request. You're not voting. You're not making contributions to the campaign. You are organizing fundraisers. You're not even organizing block parties and inviting them to come. You don't even go to the meetings when they have political meetings. There are so many town hall meetings that I attended, and I've hardly seen Guyanese in these in Queens. So these are very, very important ways of participating. Look, when I was teaching and I was head of the union in my school, I was in charge of organizing phone banks. And so every election cycle, whether it was the primary or the general election, I am recruiting people to go to phone banks. I couldn't get Guyanese. I had to take my niece, my nephews, my wife to go to phone banks since the time of before Bill Clinton. I think who was running. I forgot who was running. And so these are very, very important things that Guyanese need to do in order to exercise some influence in Washington, so that they will have a greater eye on Guyanese affairs.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So moving over to Mike, Mike, Dr. Bisram was very clear in terms of Guyanese participation in the U.S. electoral system, the U.S. political system. What additional ways can you recommend for the Guyanese people in the diaspora? And don't limit only to the United States. I believe the foreign secretary in Guyana is of Guyanese parents, if he wasn't actually born in Guyana. And certainly Canada plays a major role as well. I know, Mike, you wanted to bring in the discussion tonight, America, Canada, Britain, and the European Union. But I wanted to kind of focus more in America, but in this context here, what would be your comments that where Guyanese in the diaspora could additionally be able to contribute towards making these changes in Guyana?
Okay, thank you. You made reference, you said, to the Foreign Secretary of Guyana. I think you're referring to David Lammy, the British Foreign Secretary from the UK, who's of Guyanese descent. The most powerful group in US politics is the Jewish lobby. Nobody comes close to the Jewish lobby. On both sides of the US Congress, Israel is a force to be reckoned with. They've got friends in the Democratic camp. They've got friends in the Republican camp. Look at what's happening in the Middle East. Biden left, but policy didn't really change. Smooth transition. The second most powerful voice in US politics is the Cuban-American lobby. Marco Rubio is Cuban. Senator Ted Cruz is Cuban. Elvira Salazar is Cuban. Down in Miami, Mario Diaz-Balart, whose aunt was actually married to Fidel Castro, he's Cuban. Carlos Jimenez, another Cuban. And you had, I think, Robert Menendez from New Jersey, who found himself in a whole heap of problems. He's Cuban too. But then even the lobbyists for the government of Guyana, Carlos Trujillo, he's Cuban American. So if you want to look at it, the only other group, well, from the Caribbean, the Cuban Americans are there. They ensure that they have a voice and they have cabinet positions in the form of Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Rubio, and as in the case of the former national head of the Western Hemisphere and the NSC, Maria Clavier Caron, who was until recently President Trump's special envoy to Latin America. He's Cuban American too. Then beyond the Cubans, the only other group I would say within CARICOM that's got a voice are the Jamaicans. Colin Powell of Jamaican descent. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I understand the strong establishments.
But Guyanese don't have that. They prefer to go to Sibyl's, drink Mommy, eat cake, and talk fart. They're not organized. They don't want to spend, as the gentleman said. Today, if you want to get the attention of the Trump people, you better get a front seat at Mar-a-Lago or take out a 1.5 million US membership at the executive branch being opened very soon by Donald Trump Jr. in Washington, D.C. Guyanese don't play in the center of US politics. And you can't blame anyone. They don't want to spend, they don't want to get involved, so who can you blame? The Jamaicans, the Cubans, they have a plan and they're sticking with it. Why can't we, or why couldn't we have elected a Guyanese American from the Queens area to represent them in the US Congress? Why?
Yeah. I'm sure. Mike. Dr. Blackman, one of the difficulties that we are facing in terms is assimilation among Guyanese. If you look at the parade in Brooklyn about a week and a half ago, many Afro-Guyanese, not many Indo-Guyanese. And when there are functions or parades out in the Queens areas, many Indo-Guyanese. Any suggestions, given your wisdom, your experiences on all sides, that we in America could look towards some sort of a unity between the Afro and the Indo-Guyanese and all other Guyanese races, so that we could move collectively within the American political landscape that will be able to get changes, positive changes for Guyana. Any thoughts on that?
Well, this was what I was about to say when Mike was talking. I said the challenge for us as a community is precisely that we're fractured. We have like home. We're in a way reproducing some of the flaws of home, but I think the opportunity is there, and it's there, but in a different context. I think we're not going to. We've traveled, I've traveled the axis between Brooklyn and Queens, and I understand the challenges of forming the community, and we have to continue to do that. But I think, to Mike's point, we might not be represented in the political space in the same way, but I think we find ourselves represented in, say, the education space. And so I think we have to begin to look at working along those lines. You will find Guyanese of different racial and ethnic groups being students together at the university. Here at various universities, you can find Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese at Howard University. You can find Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese at Medgar Evers College here in the City University of New York. And so I think we have to be more strategic about the place at which we're trying to do this. And as I was thinking that, we're not going to win that game. I think it's the thing is set, and we have to find some places where we already have some synergies and look to build on those places. And so I think the education and working around capacity building in education could be something that offers us an opportunity as a diaspora to engage. Around health, that's also an area where we have a number of people across the ethnic and racial spectrum who are in nursing, who are doctors, who are in medicine. And I think that those are the areas that we have to allow those professionals to hopefully, they're working in a space that is different, and they can perhaps better withstand some of the pressures that come from some of the tribal pressures that come to that face people, so that they're better able to speak to it. But I think it's what we have to do. We have to think about how we impact the policy, and I think we have to look for places where we already have a fairly good representation and a fairly good culture going, in which we find both Indo, Afro, and Guyanese of all races engaged. And I think education and health are those two areas where I think we can form communities. Yeah.
It's very good points, Dr. Blackman. It's very good points. Dr. Bisram, we're not going to be able to cover the other aspect of the program on positive effects on the economy or even security. I guess we should schedule another program to cover those two additional topics. We're coming to ending of the program, and I'd like to call in for closing remarks. But in your closing remarks, Dr. Bisram, I'm asking all three gentlemen to end the closing remarks with some sort of a hope for the people. Dr. Blackman recommended where in the area of education and health, the diaspora probably could work together and bridging those gaps. I think counting the cost, what it has really cost us, not only 59 years of independence, but also what is going to cost us going down in the future. So in asking for your closing remarks, give us some hope to look forward to, something to say, yes, there will be some change towards this social aspect of Guyanese life, both in Guyana and abroad?
Okay, so let me comment very briefly on the economic aspects of the United States engagement, positive impact of the United States in the economy. Firstly, as we know, Exxon is there, and so not only Exxon, but there are dozens of other investment companies, all related to energy. I think they're playing a far more important role in the economy than, say, the Chinese. The Chinese are there, and they're providing significant amount of loans, but they're also impacting negatively on Guyanese quality of life. We have read in the papers about various protests and strikes and disruptions and violence, all tied to the Chinese because of the way they culturally do business that undermines Guyanese businesses. This is not part of how the Americans conduct business, who conduct business largely with integrity. Socially, I don't know. I mean, in my engagement with Guyanese, there is not much hope for the future in Guyana. Rarely they speak negatively about life in Guyana, and everyone is looking for a visa to migrate to, with US as number one and Canada as number two.
Okay. Moving over to you, Mike. Closing statements, and leave us with some hopes, Mike. Leave the people with some hopes.
Yeah, you need to get tough on crime. You need to implement the death penalty for drug trafficking, money laundering. You need to have zero tolerance for skullduggery, malfeasance. You need the rule of law. You need transparency. You need good governance. Until and unless you have that, you spinning your wheels. You can be the fastest growing economy in the world, but unless you're committed to the rule of law, good governance, ethical leadership, morality, spiritual morality to begin with, right? You can't be a leader of a country and being in bed with persons who are sanctioned and then, like Peter denied Christ. Jesus said, "You will deny me thrice at the crow of the cock" in the Garden of Gethsemane. You can't do that. You've got to be consistent. If you want to become like Singapore, you better start thinking like Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew ran a tight ship. There was no room there for moral indiscipline, for immorality. And Guyana is not going to move forward in any positive manner until and unless we have a judiciary that is totally free, a police service that's really worthy of respect. As far as I'm concerned, the Guyana Police Service needs to be disemboweled and reconstructed. The army, they're limping along like a half-dead creature. They don't have the tools they need to do their work. So, the country is really, it's like you're aboard the Titanic and people are getting off before they hit the iceberg. As Professor Bisram said, everybody needs a visa. Well, I'm going to tell you, don't come to the United States illegally. Don't do that. Because if you get caught, you are going to be sent to CCOT in El Salvador. And there are many lovely videos. So if you're coming to the US, follow the process. Do not believe you can be pulled over here by a cop and you give him a $5,000 or a hamburger. That doesn't
Okay,
work
Mike.
in America. We are a nation of laws, and if you're coming to America, you must be prepared to toe the line, or you could take a Georgie bundle and head back to where you came from.
Yeah, Mike, that's your famous statement.
George Bush.
But on the issue of religious spirituality, Mr. Neville Sital, he wrote, "Religious leaders failing their respective communities in Guyana, lost of spiritual teaching, morals, and integrity." Dr. Blackman, leave the audience tonight with some hope, something to look forward to, that Guyanese across the land in Guyana, all over the diaspora, will continue to work towards bringing about these changes that Mike Singh is saying needs to happen.
They must happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think no harm. I'm mindful of both Mike and Dr. Bisram. You know, our conversation is kind of, they've stated what the essential truths are, right? Um, but I want to shape it this way. I want to say, like, look, you can't, Guyana can't do the future by itself. And I think we have to somehow help the people in Guyana to understand that the Guyanese who are sitting outside of Guyana are
Thank
going to be necessary to help to move this future in the direction that it needs to move.
you.
And you know, while I'm not going as far as Dr. Bisram's, you know, I still like the sovereignty of Guyana. I think the you know, we have to figure out how to triangulate, you know, Bill Clinton's famous words, triangulate, but we have to figure out some way how to triangulate Guyana, the US, and the diaspora. We
Hmm.
have to somehow figure out how to get to the right middle with these
Hmm.
various parties. Huh? And look, you know, the thing to get to, and this is where I think we have to work. Today, I asked someone. I said, "But what if you had to do one thing? What's the strategic thing about integrating the diet?" And he said to me, he said, "You know what? The the government at home has got to be clear on their role for the diaspora." He said, "You can fight it all the time." So I think as a strategic first step, maybe what we want to be doing as we look at the political manifestos for Guyana in this moment, to look at which party is making a serious effort to meaningfully engage the diaspora, because it's this meaningful engagement that will drive the kind of innovation, the kind of strengthening of institutions that Mike talked about, the kind of shared responsibility that is necessary to move us forward. So, and I think, I think we've look, our program is a glimpse of that cooperation, right? So just this act that we're engaged with here is a small glimpse of the possibility of having a conversation about Guyana between people who come from different parts of Guyana, even though Mike and I nominally were from the same village, which is so we can see that we've come from the same village. We don't even know that we're from the same villages, right? We're all from the same broad village called Guyana. And I think once we recognize that and we begin to have that understanding, first in Guyana, it has to be understood there. It has to be understood that there's value here in the diaspora. Then I think we begin to leverage these professional US networks and begin to shape a more collective vision about what Guyana looks like over the long haul, where we have a nation where we're not waiting for someone to save us, but we recognize if our policemen are corrupt, that this is not what we want. And so it's a question, I think, of just understanding that we're not as bad as we think we are. And it just requires us to be strategic, to be united. And I know that's it's easy to say united, that's hard work. And to be committed to a vision of Guyana that is bigger than ourselves and our ethnic groups from which we come. And
Thank you.
and if we can do that, then we can move this thing forward, right? But we have to be committed to more than ourselves in the tribe.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Blackman. And once again, viewers, our discussion tonight, how can the United States of America affect additional positive changes towards Guyana's social, economic, and security development? As you could see and you have heard tonight, you have different opinions. We are a platform that's trying to bring different sides and having a conversation where we can all change from within so that we can be able to affect the change on the outside. I really want to express our gratitude to Devin Bissoon. He has been with this program since inception, been at 6 years. He's been very dedicated to this program, and we really want to extend our gratitude to him, to Dr. Bisram, Mike Singh, and Professor Dr. Blackman. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, colleagues.